On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the potential silver lining in the shutdown cloud.
We have an opportunity to rebuild, to take a look at that operating model and say, how does that really need to work in the future? And how can we bring in technologies such as AI?
Former NASA CDO Ron Thompson on FedGov Today in just a moment. First, though, on FedGov Today TV this week, how and when you can move money around during the shutdown. Former IRS Commissioner and former OMB Controller Danny Werfel will tell you what you can do and what you can't. And former DHS Chief Procurement Officer Soraya Correa explains the most important things to tell your team during and after the shutdown. You can watch the show on the FedGov Today YouTube channel anytime, and it's available on our website at fedgovtoday.com. Congress may be getting closer to ending the federal government shutdown. You can read more about that on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. When it does end, federal leaders who've been through shutdowns before say current employees will return to a different environment than they left. Ron Thompson is founder of West River Consultancy. He's former chief data officer at NASA. Ron, I quote from the Washington Post, "It has not been a productive day," according to one Ron Thompson of the U.S. Census Bureau. Washington Post dated November 14th, 1995. Seems like the more things change, the more things stay the same. Ron, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. I really appreciate you having me on today. Yes, that article was, I became a new supervisor at the U.S. Census Bureau. So again, 1995, that was during the Newt Gingrich era of Contract with America. And I believe that, my 32-year federal career, that was the first time we had a substantial government lapse of funding. And again, becoming a new supervisor, I had people working for me. The uncertainty was very real. We weren't sure at the time about, how furloughed workers were going to be paid, just like today. So what is past is prologue, just like it says on the National Archives. And I think the world today is very much uncertain as it was back in 1995.
Having seen all of these shutdowns through all these years, I alluded to the fact that you're not the only person to say when we go back, it'll be different than before. What is going to be different for the folks that return, hopefully very soon?
I have not tallied how many shutdowns, lapse of fundings we had during that time. Went through reorganizations, and I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful experience. My last job was at NASA, but I've been to several federal agencies in key executive leadership positions. Initially, when you come back, you have to make sure the mission is being done, the services to the citizens are being delivered. So that's job one. And I think what's different this time, though, quite frankly, for instance, is there's a restarting and a continuation of services that need to happen, but also the opportunity to rebuild, I think, is unique at this point in time. Realigning stakeholder expectation, reaffirming trust to the citizen that are getting our services throughout these federal agencies, and then the shared sense of mission for the people that have to deliver this. I know myself and other federal employees, that sense of mission is in a sense of who they are. It's what drives them. It's what, so that empathy as a leader for these organizations, that has to be first and foremost. And you need to show up as a leader, during these uncertain times, just to be fair and offer some stability. So that's the thing, that operational responsibility for the organizations has to continue, but also you need a stable environment for the workers coming back. And this disruption point, I think, is also an inflection point for maybe you don't do things the way you've always done it. Maybe you take the time to rebuild. Maybe you take the time to work with the business of the organization to really focus on outcomes and the quality of outcomes being delivered.
How would you advise somebody in your shoes to rebuild, as you just alluded to leverage that opportunity to rebuild, Ron, to really make the most of it?
Yeah, I think it's important to know, from the top of the organization all the way through the organization is what outcomes are being delivered, and are the success of those outcomes being exceeding expectations, not just meeting, Francis, but exceeding expectations. So that alignment is absolutely super critical, to make sure that what's being delivered, and the old way of doing business, we're seeing less people doing a lot of manual work. So I'm really bullish on looking at operating models for organizations and redefining how those organizations work. There are going to be less people to do things. We're seeing the roles of government being reshaped. We're seeing that being reduced. Bringing in automation. There's not a better time. I look back in that time span. Not a better time than now to bring in automation to do work and make sure that quality of work is being done, and those outcomes, those long-term outcomes aren't derailed. So staying focused on the mission and being people-centered and have that grounding experience is definitely the key.
What's the biggest obstacle, do you think, to implementing automation designs for people who are coming back when they already have a workforce that's a little frazzled and are not necessarily sure that even when they come back at the end of the shutdown, that long-term they have a future in an organization?
Yeah, I had this question. I was over in Europe last month and speaking to a conference out there, and folks had the very same question. Is automation gonna put me out of a job? And that worrisome. I think honestly, personally, it will be different going the future. In the future, there will be jobs that have been done in the past and currently being done that will not exist in the future. But I also think that that's an opportunity to elevate that skill set beyond a lot of manual work that's being done. So I would say, if I were talking to that next generation coming in, that FUD factor, fear, uncertainty of what's going on, I would say embrace changing the role. If you're in a role that is not using technology, embrace that technology. And then for the leaders of these organizations, I would say look where automation could come in and improve quality, improve timeliness of outcome, be open to that business process to accept what technology that can bring.
When you think back to the shutdowns that you've worked on before, what were the long-term implications? Not just a month after people came back, 6 months, a year after people came back. How did you see those shutdowns influencing, if at all, the way that the organization did business?
So my experience, again, through these federal agencies is the care and feeding from just the operational aspect. The enhancements, the backlog for enhancements in many of these cases really built up, and the impact to cost and schedule for delivering services or products was extended. And then the business expectations didn't change because they still wanted that done at the time that was agreed upon initially. So I would say that any slack in a schedule was definitely compressed. The risk of making these changes and putting in production early, for example, were known and accepted from the business. So that's another aspect of this too. But again, I think what's different this time, Francis, is we're just not restarting the operations that have been paused. I think we have an opportunity to rebuild, to take a look at that operating model and say, how does that really need to work in the future, and how can we bring in technologies such as AI and use that? AI right now, that role is separate and unique. I do believe at some point in time that will be baked into everything from an operational point of view. So that role and those changes, Francis, back to your question, I think took longer to do, but now I think it's a different world today than it was, even the last shutdown that we had, that was about the same amount of time we're at now. So,
Ron, it's great to have you on the program. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Francis. It's good to see you.
You can read more about what's happening with the shutdown on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The FedGov Today podcast is back tomorrow. You'll learn how to leverage your agency's technology posture post-shutdown from former OPM CIO Melvin Brown. If you don't want to miss that, you can follow the FedGov Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on the FedGov Today YouTube channel, or on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for listening.